Hello everyone, welcome to today's session of Easy Dharma for Difficult Times. My name is Pastor Niral. Easy Dharma for Difficult Times is a series of live streaming teachings that myself and Pastor David are doing every night at 9 p.m. apart from on Thursdays, where we hope to share a little bit of the Dharma with you. And for the last couple of nights, David has been sharing the life story of Lama Tsongkhapa. So today I want to conclude on the 6 realms. So I've been through most of the realms, and today I'll be talking about the human realm. All right, let's just see who's come online. So, as many of you know who have been watching from the beginning of this of the series of talks that I've been giving as part of Easy Dharma for Difficult Times, I actually started talking about the Four Noble Truths first, and after that, I gave a little explanation on karma using the karma chart that was compiled by His Eminence Samrimji. And then following that, I've been giving sessions on the 6 realms of existence as a part of the karma chart, actually. All right, so Martin Yo's online. Hello, nice to see you here. Mr. Lum, good to see you, a regular. Yu Seng is online as well. Pastor Hani, welcome. Tata Ong, thank you very much. Karen Wong, thank you very much for joining, also a regular. And Chung, as usual. Irene Lim is also here. Jerry is here. And Pastor David has joined too. So good evening to all of you. And thanks for joining this session. So in this session, what I'm going to be talking about is the human realm. All right. And I just wanted to quickly go over why I've been talking about the realms, because a question was asked to me during the week was, why are you going through the realms? Well, actually, the reason why I'm going through the realms is because in order to understand the karma chart that Tenma Rinpoche compiled and made for all of us to understand how karma works, so we can actually understand it better and actually use it so we can actually transform our lives in a beneficial way. One of the sections of it is actually the 6 realms of existence. It's right down on the bottom left-hand corner of the karma chart, all right? And the reason why it's there is because karma is the force that kind of propels us to have to take rebirth again and again within samsara. And samsara itself is kind of categorized into 6 realms of existence. So these 6 realms are places that we need to take rebirth in again and again and again. Okay, it's a process that doesn't end unless you reach enlightenment, you reach the state of the Buddha. And this is something that the Buddha saw when he achieved enlightenment, and it's something that the Buddha taught. So over the last quite a few sessions, I've been going over the 6 realms. So the 6 realms are actually divided into 2. There is what's known as the higher realms, which are the God realm, the demigod realm, and the human realm. And you have the lower realms, which are the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realms. All right. So I've seen quite a few more people join. So hello to Gillian Lin. Thank you very much for joining. Sharon Ong is here. JC Go as well. Kin Ho is back, another regular. Good evening to everyone. David Chu is also online, and Pastor Shin is here. Iman as well. Thank you, David. Yes, I'm feeling much better. Thank you very much. So, I hope everyone's keeping okay, and during this MCO, and everybody's doing well. All right. Hello, Elsie. Nice to see you back. Good evening. So I think on the first session, I haven't been covering the realms in sequential order. All right. But I have covered the Hungry Ghost realm that I spent two sessions on. and then we went over the hell realms, and then the animal realms, and then I did the god and the demigod realm in one session. And today what I'm going to be concentrating is the human realm. Now, when we're coming at the human realms from the angle of the 6 realms of existence, especially when we're looking at it from the viewpoint of karma and how karma works, the things that we actually concentrate on or study on and then contemplate on is actually the various types of suffering that actually go on in these realms, or what happens in these realms that actually makes us suffer. And that usually puts a lot of people off Buddhism, because we concentrate on the suffering so much. But the reason why we actually concentrate on the suffering is because you can't overcome a problem. You can't remedy a situation unless you know what the problem is, unless you know that there is some sort of suffering that you need to work on to alleviate yourself from that particular suffering. So that again ties in with the Four Noble Truths that I was talking about originally, which is first to understand that there is suffering, and that suffering has its causes, that there's a state that is free of suffering, which is known as enlightenment, and then the way to get there. So actually, all of the sessions that I've been given actually have a general thread, and that is they all link to the Four Noble Truths in some way or another. All right? So today what I wanted to explain is the sufferings of the human realm. Now, the human realm, we're all living it now. So usually we don't actually go about our lives thinking that we are suffering. We're just usually going around about our daily business, doing what we usually do. Most of the times we're just trying to make our way through it as best as possible. And there are times when we do go through various forms of suffering, and at that particular point in time, we realize that we are suffering, and we kind of emotionally engage with that suffering. We kind of get drawn into it. But what we don't do is that we don't realize that there is a way out of suffering ultimately. What we only think about at that moment when we're going through a particular suffering is that we're suffering from that particular ailment or that particular situation, and we're just trying to find a way out of that situation only. So Buddhism actually teaches us to take that thinking further and to say that if you're suffering now, if you're suffering at this precise moment in time, and you're trying to figure ways to alleviate that suffering and get out of that suffering, and maybe even never have that same type of suffering again, you should extend that further, because we are more than just our present human life. We are the sum of countless previous lifetimes and countless future lifetimes, which are all going to have some form of suffering or another if we don't get out of it. So the human realm is said to have 7 main types of suffering. So that is kind of the topic for today's. That's what I'll be discussing with all of you today. So the first suffering is actually the suffering of birth. Okay? Now, for most of us, we wouldn't classify a birth as suffering. We classify it as something that is natural, something that is wholesome, something that brings life into the world. And you're right, it is a situation in which life is brought into the world, but there is suffering involved. All right, there's suffering involved on the part of the mother who has to carry the child to term and then go through delivery. But the usual suffering that is described within Buddhism, within Buddhist teachings, is actually the process of birth itself for the baby. Okay. Now, from a Buddhist perspective, the consciousness enters the body at the time of conception. So if you think about being conscious while you are growing in your mother's womb, it is said to be quite a torturous experience. First is that there is no space, you have no space to move in your mother's womb, and that you're squashed inside your mother for so many months. Even though you are growing, even though you are developing, you can still feel. Although the feelings might not be the same exactly as we feel with our physical body right now, as humans who have already taken birth and who have grown up outside of our mother's womb, there is still feeling within your mother's womb when she's carrying you to term. Now, for most people, this suffering, this trauma of coming into the world, basically, is something that we have forgotten. We don't remember it, okay? But there are certain people who do actually have a memory or have a fragmented memory of being in the womb. And they always say that the people who do remember that it is quite torturous because they do feel squashed, they do feel at the mercy of whatever their mother is doing. So this is something that Buddhists actually meditate on, they contemplate on, and it is one of the sufferings that actually mark the human realm. So even though it is the thing that brings us into the human realm, it in itself is actually a form of suffering. So that is the first suffering that's usually enumerated for the human realm. Okay. So seeing some more people come online. Sukfan's online. Hello, well, thank you very much for joining. Esther Go, good evening. Yik Ming is online. Thank you for joining. Hello. And Joy is also online. Hello, thanks for joining this evening. All right. So I've been talking about the suffering of birth, which is the first suffering that is usually mentioned when talking about the human realm. LC Toy has put a comment. I thought I'm the one suffering during pregnancy and vomiting. Yes. So mothers also do go through a lot of suffering during pregnancy. It is not just the baby. Hello, Pastor Antoinette. I've seen you've just joined as well. Good evening. Thank you for joining. So again, it is not just the mother that, it's not just the child that suffers during birth. It's actually the mother as well. And I'm sure the fathers out there watching this would also like to argue that the fathers also suffer as well. So if you do have any questions or any comments, please do ask them, and I'm more than happy to answer them tonight. The next suffering that is usually talked about is actually the suffering of aging. Now, this is a suffering that most of us do see a lot of. I mean, we're living with our families, we're living in a community. You do see people get older, and as they get older, their bodies do start to get frail, and sometimes they start to lose their senses as they get older as well. So this is a suffering that most of us actually see, but we can interact with elderly people. We might even be elderly ourselves, interacting with other elderly people, and over time, for youngsters, they don't really understand. I think they don't really understand what it is like to grow older, for your body to start having more problems, for maybe your hearing to go or your eyesight to go. Things, unfortunately, that is the way that samsara is, that is the way the human realm is that as we age, our body does tend to not work as well as it did when we were younger. Now, this isn't just a physical suffering, it is also a mental suffering. It's an emotional suffering that people go through, because as the elderly people out there can attest, they do have a certain they do reminisce about having a younger body, of being able to do things that they can't anymore. Maybe in their prime of their youth, they were very physically fit, but as they got older and the body gets worn down more, they're not able to do as much as they used to. I remember my grandfather. My grandfather had my yeah my grandfather. He had a hardware store in Kenya, in Nairobi, in Kenya. So my family is originally from Kenya, in Africa, and my grandfather had set up a hardware store in the capital city called Nairobi. And my grandfather was a person during his old age would always talk about how he was quite fit as a youngster, and how he manned the entire shop, and he moved all the equipment and all the items himself, and he was able to do it. And towards the end of his life, he would complain that now he can't even go to the kitchen to make himself a meal without feeling tired, or without having some sort of pain in his body. So it is not just the physical pain that you go through, it's also the emotional pain, because you had something previously which was youth, which was vitality, which was a body that could do things, which was a memory that was fast and that was sharp. But as you get older, you kind of lose these things, or these things deteriorate, and that causes a lot of suffering as well. Now, for some of the youngsters out there, maybe even the younger people watching this live stream, maybe they probably don't realize it. They probably don't think about it. But Buddhism actually teaches you to contemplate on it. Even if you are young, even if you do have a good body, a good mind, and good sense faculties, not to take it for granted, to actually, and not to abuse it, to actually use it for something that's beneficial, to improve yourself. Because that way, when you do get older, when things aren't working as well as they once were, you don't have as much emotional suffering, because you actually spent your youth, and even if you're not youthful, and even middle-aged people, you still have the capability of doing a lot with not only your body but also with your mind, about transforming yourself and helping others. So when you get to the stage later on in life where your body does start to deteriorate, you don't have as much emotional suffering. All right, there's no way around the physical suffering, unfortunately, but you can lessen the emotional suffering. So with these sufferings that I'm talking about, it is not just physical suffering, but it's also the emotional suffering that we have to bear. And most of the suffering actually within the six realms is more emotional and mental than it is physical. So I see we have some more comments. So Cynthia Lee's joined. Mahesh is also online. Nice to see you online. Elsie Toy said, also suffer the labor pain. Yep, correct. For the suffering of birth. That's correct. And Sharon says, yes, at my age, I can feel the wear and tear. Used to joke about bad knees, and now I do know what bad knees feel like. That's true. Yeah, bad knees is one of these things that people always joke about the elderly, or elder people, older people than you having bad knees, and then sometime you develop it yourself, and then you do stop joking about it like Sharon did. Mr. Lum says, oh, okay. Mr. Lum says, we are fortunate to have a human form so that we can practice the Dharma in comparison to the 5 other realms where the opportunity to practice is practically nil. You're correct in saying that. And this is something that I'll touch a little bit on later on, after I've finished the 7 sufferings. Melissa says, yes, I used to climb really fast, the tree, the gate, but now I'm 57, I slowed down a lot. I am embracing pain and I'm okay with that. Good. That when you embrace what is happening, you can actually move past it. So unfortunately, the way the samsara works is that we need to go through the physical suffering of it, but you can actually work on the emotional suffering of it, and that actually goes a long way to helping you deal with not just the sufferings that you're facing due to old age or getting older, but actually also helping you to face other forms of suffering. Because if you can deal with it emotionally in regards to one form of suffering, that is perfect, because you can actually use that way and that method of dealing with that suffering, and you can apply it to a lot more things than just that one specific situation. The next suffering is the suffering of illness. Now, this is one that I'm sure everyone watching this has been through, and it is a suffering that we all know, that we've all experienced. But usually what happens is when we are suffering, we're in pain, we're going through various physical sufferings. But again, as with all types of suffering, there is a kind of emotional, mental suffering attached with illness. Now, illness can come in many forms. It can come in the form of having the flu, having an allergic reaction, all the way to major illnesses such as cancer. Okay, so there is many forms and many varieties and many degrees of the suffering that we face from illness. And it's something that we have all experienced. However, again, when it comes to suffering, once we're out of it, we usually have very short-term memory. When we're going through the suffering of illness, we feel it a lot. We feel it physically, we feel it mentally, we feel it emotionally. It can affect those around us as well. But then once you've recovered from it and you're now well and you're now healthy again, that suffering usually gets put to the back of your mind, and you usually kind of forget about it. If it's a serious illness and you've recovered it, maybe, yes, you will then think about it more. You will think about the sufferings you went through and what you needed to do to get yourself out of it. And maybe it does give you that strength and that willpower to actually make a difference in other people's lives, and to make the most of the life that you have left. But in most cases, even if it's a simple cold or a flu and you're going through it, once it's finished, you just think, oh, it was just a cold, oh, it was just a flu, I'm just, going to continue on my life as it were. And then you kind of forget about it. And usually what happens is most people don't do anything after that to help protect themselves, to lessen the chances of getting the cold or the flu again. They just go back to their life how it was. And eventually they're going to get a cold or a flu again. So it becomes a cycle of being ill, recovering, being ill, recovering, being ill, recovering. And each time that happens, you do go through both physical and mental suffering. So that is the suffering of illness. The fourth suffering is actually the suffering of death. Now, I think many of you who are watching this probably already know that how Buddhism, or have an inkling of how Buddhism comes towards death, and especially things like death meditation, in which you visualize and contemplate yourself dying. So you have to suffer through the ending of your human rebirth and the start of another rebirth, whether it is positive or negative. As we have seen, it is always going to have some form of suffering, as I've been talking about in my previous sessions. But the suffering of death isn't just about yourself, it's also about the people around you. Because we're social beings, we have emotions, and those emotions aren't just for ourselves, they're also for other people as well. So we do become attached to other people, we do love other people, whether it is your spouse or your partner or your parents, your children, your colleagues, your friends. We do have emotional connections with people, and when somebody dies, that emotional connection is severed. And when that connection is severed, it causes us pain. So this isn't something I'm going to dwell into too much now, because I think we all have experiences of losing a loved one, and we all know what it is like to lose a loved one and how much suffering that you have to endure. So I'm not going to be talking about this one in that much detail. The next suffering is called, is usually termed being separated from the beautiful. Okay, so what does it mean by the beautiful? The beautiful things we cherish. Okay, the terminology I'm using comes from the Lamrim. Okay, so to be separated from the beautiful is anything that we find beautiful, that we cherish, that we love, that we hold dear to us, whether it is a friend, whether it is a relative, whether it is our guru, whether it is our house or our car or our money or our prestige or our name. We all have things in life that we find beautiful, that we cherish, and we have a very, very strong emotional connection to it. Unfortunately, one of the sufferings of the human realm is that you will have to be separated from it. So in the case of a loved one, perhaps something happens, a situation occurs within your relationship in which you're no longer talking to each other. Now you are away from your loved one. You're no longer with them. So the emotional strain of not having something you cherish so much causes you suffering. I just need to refresh my screen because it looks like I've gone offline. But it's not just a person that you can cherish, that you can hold dear to you. It can be an object, and obviously it is easier for us to understand about being parted from an object. For example, if you're extremely attached to your car and then one day you get into an accident and the car's ruined, you're fine but the car's ruined, then you have to part from it. You have to part from your car. Now, a lot of us usually have fond memories of a particular object or a particular item that we used to own, and we have parted from it, and we do have a sense of, I mean, sometimes we look fondly back at, oh, I used to own this I don't know, car or this toy from my childhood, and I used to love it a lot. I used to play with it a lot, but it broke or I don't have it anymore. I look
when we say we look fondly back at something, you do look fondly back at something because you're remembering how that object or that situation made you feel. But actually, that is also a form of suffering, because you suffer from no longer having it. That is why remembering something fondly, something fondly, is it brings you a sense of happiness, of because you remember how you used to feel when you had it. But the very fact that you don't have it anymore and that you are remembering it fondly means that you are going through some form of suffering or another. Hello, good evening to Callista. Callista's online. Pastor Gimli is also online. Yo Miaoki is also online. Good evening. Nice of you to join us. So, what I've been talking about so far is the sufferings that we have to endure within the human realm. Now, if you do have any questions or comments, please do ask them on the comment section and I will answer them. The next suffering I wanted to talk about is what is known as suffering of meeting with the ugly. So, if beautiful is something we cherish, something we hold dear, the ugly is basically something we don't like. All right. Usually, the ugly refers to people and it refers to objects or situations. Now, when coming at it from the point of view of an object, I'll give you a very good example of something very, very ugly that I detest. Sorry, I do. And it is very common in Malaysia, and a lot of people like it, and I don't know how or why they would like it, and it's called durian. Okay, when I meet with durian, it is meeting with the ugly for me. Okay, I can't stand the smell, I can't stand the taste, and I, I, I really don't understand how people can enjoy eating it. But I know that a lot of Malaysians love eating it and they go absolutely crazy when they're eating durian. So, durian for them is meeting the beautiful. Durian for me is meeting the ugly. So, basically, it is an object that I don't want to be near. It is an object that um, it gives me a sensation of revulsion when I see durian. Um, I don't know how many people out there. Does anybody out there actually agree with me? I don't know if anybody will agree with me, but I'm hoping at least one person agrees with me. Hopefully. Um, so, the ugly is basically something that you have revulsion towards. It's something that you do not want to meet, because when you meet it, it gives you a very strong sense of suffering, which is revulsion. Now, I'm using durian as an example, but it is more than just objects. It is also people, it is also situations. For example, nobody wants to be walking down the street and then get robbed. That is meeting the ugly. Getting robbed is a suffering that nobody wants to go through. It's a situation that nobody wants to go through. But similarly, this also applies to people. Now, I am sure everyone watching this out there has an example of a person that they do not want to come across, that they do not want to meet, that they do not want to have interaction with, because you have strong emotional, negative emotional thoughts about this particular person. Maybe you perceive this person to have harmed you in the past, or maybe you perceive them not to be a nice person, so you really don't want to come across with them. Everybody is going to have at least one person like this, Situations are going to be aplenty. Objects are going to be aplenty. But people-wise, everyone will at least have one. Now, if you sit down and you think about it, there is somebody right now that you can name off the top of your head that you consider to be ugly, so you do not want to meet with them. And that's okay, because none of us are enlightened yet. We're on our way there. It's a process. Spiritual transformation is a process, is something that we need to understand first what we're actually going through, and then we work from there. So understanding what meeting the ugly, the suffering of meeting the ugly. Okay? Okay, Joy Kam says, no one agrees with you, Pastor Niral. We all love durian. Cynthia Lee says, sorry, wrong example here. So that's 2 people against me. Esther Go, Pastor Niral, I don't eat durians too. Yes, okay, at least 1 person. 1 person. Okay, Irene says, I love durians. Pastor Niral, I don't fancy durian too. Yes, okay, 2 people. Fantastic. So I'm not the black sheep. There are Malaysians who think that durian isn't that great. Okay? But for me, I have a very strong emotional reaction to durian. Yeah. Okay. Now, the last suffering which I want to talk about is a bit of a nuanced one. And that is, we suffer when we want something, but we don't actually get it. So what happens is, if you remember one of Pastor David's first sessions during Easy Dharma for Difficult Times, Pastor David was talking about attachment. And Pastor David was saying that we multiply the good qualities, we over-exaggerate the good qualities of something, and then we become attached to it, or we start desiring it, whether it's a person, whether it's an object, whether it's to eat durians, like I know some people are now thinking of doing, since I have planted the imprint of durian into your mind stream. We crave things, we want things. And I think in one of my previous sessions, I gave the examples of a certain pastor who wanted a particular dessert from Secret Recipe and was very obsessed with this dessert. And in this case, this pastor was, over the course of a couple of weeks, all this pastor wanted to do was eat this cake, was eat this dessert. And then we finally got there, and this pastor thought that eating this cake is going to bring them so much happiness because it looks so good. There's so many advertisements about it. It looks fantastic. Everybody says it's great. And then as she took a bite full of it, she realized it wasn't that great. So in this case, she suffered. And it was the suffering of not finding what she wanted. So she wanted an absolutely amazing cake, which was the dessert of all desserts, the best dessert in the world. But what she ended up having was just a normal dessert. So because she didn't get what she wanted, she suffered. She suffered because reality didn't match her expectations. So because reality didn't match her expectations, she suffered. Now, this is just one example of things that can happen, but there are many, many different examples of things that can happen like this. For example, one day, a couple of months ago, my air conditioning in my room broke. And I can't stand the heat in Malaysia. I'm still not used to the heat that we have here, okay? I was born and brought up in the UK, so I'm used to a more milder climate. So even to this day, I need the aircon. So what I really wanted was to go into an air-conditioned room and just relax because it was just so hot. So what I really desired was cold, to be cold, to feel cool. But as soon as I went into my room and tried to turn on my air conditioning, it was broken. So at that point, I was suffering because I was already suffering because I was too hot. Now I was suffering because I'm not getting what I wanted. I didn't get the air conditioning. I didn't get to be cold. So that exasperated the suffering that I was already going through. And usually what happens is when you don't meet with what you crave for, what you desire, your suffering increases and increases and increases. Now, in some cases, this can lead to more desire for that particular thing. So in some cases, I'll give you an example, somebody wants ₦1,000,000. They want ₦1,000,000 and they're going about their job, they're putting everything into the work, everything into their business to make that 1,000,000, but they're not quite getting it yet. So what they start doing is, because they haven't got that 1,000,000, they start to put more and more energy, more and more focus into their business to get that 1,000,000 or however much it's going to be. But they still can't get it. And perhaps they can't get it because they don't have the business skills to be able to make that much money. Maybe the situation overall within the market out there means that they probably won't be able to make that 1,000,000 with whatever product that they're selling. But the person is still driving for it, is still going for it, and it makes them actually put more energy and more focus into running a business. Now, as with anything in life, if you put too much emphasis, if you put too much energy in one thing, other areas of your life are going to suffer. Perhaps the family life takes a hit. Perhaps relationships with friends takes a hit. Perhaps you start practicing the Dharma less. Perhaps you start going to the temple less. Perhaps you stop doing your sadhana because you're putting all of your energy, all of your focus into that business. So here we can see that it is not just a form of suffering. It is actually a suffering that leads you to more suffering. All right? So that is the last of the sufferings of the human realm. So I've seen some more comments. Let's see. Oh, LC Toy said, I don't eat durians. Good for you. Very good. Karen Wong said, I don't like durian as well. See, I knew there was other people out there who didn't like durian like me. Yeah, I can't stand the smell either, LC. Yeah. Actually, it's probably the smell more than the taste for me. Yeah. Rena also said, I don't eat durian. Yeah. And Joy says, the secret pasta of secret recipe. Yes. I'm not going to name names. Jacinta's online as well. Pastor Albert has joined. Okay, Joy, we all know who it's not because Pastor David just replied that it's not him. Okay. And Jerry's also online again. Yik Ming said, then sufferings that lead to happiness is the best sufferings. Not really. Any form of suffering is not good. All right? But suffering, in a sense, can lead to happiness. Because if you understand suffering, which is what I've been kind of explaining and what the scriptures do explain, things like the Lamrim, they explain suffering because in order to overcome it, you should know it. You should know what it is. So once you know the various forms of suffering that you go through, you're able to do something about it. If you don't know that there is a problem, then you're not going to be able to overcome it. So the first thing is to know what the problem is. And the scriptures do it in a certain way to enumerate the different forms of the various forms of suffering that we go through, so that we can categorize any form of suffering that we face in daily life into one of these categories. And after doing that, we can actually think about it, what the cause of it is, which is our karma, how to overcome that, which is to practice the Dharma, which is to lessen our karma by purifying our negative karma and generating merit, and transforming our mind to be able to withstand both the mental and the emotional suffering that we're going through, to make ourselves a better person, to actually strive to become better ourselves. So what is the purpose of, which actually brings me very, very well into what I wanted to talk about next, which was what is, after we know about the suffering of the human realm, what do we do with it? Okay? Well, what you do with it is you practice the Dharma. You use your human life and you practice the Dharma. As you practice the Dharma, you do two things. And these are two things that I always stress in all of my sessions, whatever I do, is purification of negative karma and accumulation of merit. These two things are necessary for you to progress spiritually. Because if you are suffering from the heavy negative effects of your karma, you're going to be suffering too much. You won't have the time to concentrate on improving yourself. Or even if you are suffering, and even if you do know the Dharma, it will be too much for you to handle before you can apply the antidote that the Dharma teaches for that particular situation or for that particular suffering. So purifying your negative karma is not just about future lifetimes. It's not just about taking good rebirths in the future. It's also about the here and now. It is also about being able to practice the Dharma in the way that you should be practicing the Dharma to actually better yourself. And on the other side of the coin, you could say, is you generate merit. When you generate merit, it is a source of, it's kind of an energy that you need that kind of fuels your spiritual path, your spiritual journey. It provides you with the means to help you overcome your negative karma in situations where maybe your negative karma can lead you to some form of suffering, but it also bolsters, your practice of the Dharma, of mind transformation, of actually improving yourself to become a better person. Now, one of the ways in which you generate merit and you purify your negative karma is most commonly known is to make offerings. And this is something that we do as Buddhists every single day on our altars, whether you make water offerings, whether you make flower offerings, whether you make incense offerings. In fact, if you have taken refuge, one of the commitments is actually to make offerings to the three jewels every single day. So if you have taken refuge and maybe you're keeping your refuge vows, or you're trying to, you should also try to keep your refuge commitments. Which one of those is actually to make offerings every single day. Now, this could be extensive offerings. It could be a simple set of offerings on your altar. It could be even just lighting a stick of incense and offering up to the enlightened beings. That is an offering, even offering a single flower. Even before you sit down to eat your meal, you offer the food up to the Buddhas, to your Guru, to Lama Tsongkhapa, to Dorje Shugden, before you eat. That itself is an offering. That is a very simple offering that we can do, especially if we're away from our altar, if we're away from home, if we don't have the capability of making normal offerings to the enlightened beings. Okay, so there are various food offering prayers that you can do. Usually in Kechara, the two that we do is the food offering prayer to Lama Tsongkhapa and the food offering prayer to Dorje Shugden. So this is something you can learn, and every time you sit down to have a meal, every time you sit down to have your breakfast, your lunch, or your dinner, before you start eating, offer up the food that you're about to eat to the Buddhas first. It's a very simple method that doesn't include any other kind of hard work that you would need to do to make a whole 8 bowls of water offering or light a stick of incense. Some of us are very lazy, I know, but we all eat. So even if you are lazy, turn what you're already doing, which is eating 3 times a day or more, into an offering. That itself generates a tremendous amount of merit and purifies your negative karma at the same time. Now, one of the ways, usually what happens is during our calendar year, we have certain days where we all go to temple, to make various offerings. We know that are very holy days, and we celebrate it together. We celebrate it as a community. Now this year, Wesak Day, our holy Wesak Day is coming up, which marks the birth, enlightenment, and parinirvana of Buddha Shakyamuni. It's literally just around the corner, and unfortunately, because of the MCO, we won't be having a public event open to everyone physically. But for those of you who have joined mine and Pastor David's talks, online activities that we've been having, Wesak Day is going to be streamed live on Facebook, and it is an entire day of various activities. We have pujas, we've got Dharma talks, we've got Buddha bathing, we have prayers by pastors, for people who have ordered offerings. Even on the day, if you join the live stream, you'll be able to put in your request for a pastor to say prayers for you on Wesak Day, and even for you to make offerings. So this is a fantastic way of going to the temple and doing something virtuous from home. And even if you are at home, don't forget, Wesak Day is a day that it's said that your merits are multiplied 1,000,000 times. So do make a lot of offerings if you can on that day. Do join in the that we'll be having. If you have taken the 8 precepts before, which is something that we usually do on Wesak Day, you can actually join it this year as well. We'll be taking them. One of the pastors will be guiding everybody online for the day. So these are all things that we can actually do to make better use of our human rebirth. So what is the point of kind of just enjoying yourself, of thinking that you're enjoying yourself and having all the things that you need in life to be happy? You know, you've got the best car, your spouse is beautiful. If your wife isn't beautiful, divorce her, get another one. Go out to Secret Recipe and eat that cake. If it's not nice, Secret Restaurant which has a better dessert. I don't know. Drive to all the way to Hong Kong to have durian instead of coming to KFR once the movement control order is over, and making offerings and circumambulating. So when you do those sorts of things, what is the point? You're just going to, as we've seen, as I've been discussing over the last couple of sessions, and that Buddhism teaches, you're just going to be stuck in that cycle of doing it again and again and again and again. And you're going to have various sufferings that you're going through. So the reason why I've been talking about the realms, the 6 realms of existence, why I talked about karma earlier, all comes down to what I was talking about at the beginning, which was the 4 Noble Truths. When you understand the 4 Noble Truths, you actually understand a way out of your suffering completely, a way to better yourself, to better your mind, to be able to overcome your suffering completely, which is to work towards the state of enlightenment. So I've got a couple of questions. David Chu asks, which cake was it that Pastor Jinai was hankering over? I'm not sure. Okay. And, I think Yiling's just joined again as well. Hello. All right. I have actually finished today talking about my 6 realms, these 6 realms of existence. And I have finished my little series, which was actually quite a long series, on the Four Noble Truths, because all of my sessions since the Four Noble Truths has been an in-depth look at basically the first and the second Noble Truth. So if anybody has any questions, please ask. If it's about this topic, the human realm, or any other topics that I've covered previously, please do ask. Otherwise, I'll probably be ending tonight's session there. My next session, I'll actually be talking about the iconography of the Buddha. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about the body of the Buddha. And the reason why is because the body of the Buddha actually incorporates and symbolizes not just what you can achieve when you practice Buddhism, which is that you achieve the state of Buddhahood, but actually encompasses the path that you should practice to achieve the state of the Buddha. So every part of the Buddha's body, from his fingernails to each hair on his body, to the direction of the hair on the Buddha's head, to all the major and the minor marks that the Buddha has, each of those marks has a particular meaning and is a reminder for us to practice in a certain way. So what I'm going to be covering in my next session is the major marks of the Buddha's body. So I don't see any more questions no more questions. So I'm going to leave you there for tonight. I hope my sessions that have covered the Four Noble Truths, karma, and the 6 realms of existence have given you a little bit of a deeper understanding into the first and the second Noble Truths. And hopefully in my next session, which I'll be obviously talking about the body of the Buddha, you'll learn more about the actual path of practice, which I'm going to discuss from the physical description of the Buddha's body. Okay, so thank you for joining, everyone. I hope everyone has a good night. So please do stay safe, stay spiritual, and stay home. Thank you very much.